6 months had passed since the funeral of Mr. Robert, yet the grief still lingered heavily in Mrs. Eleanor's heart. Every morning she would glance at the empty chair across from her dining table, the place where her husband had sat for over 40 years. She found comfort only in small mementos he had left behind: his reading glasses, his old fountain pen, and, above all, his cherished Rolex Submariner, a vintage watch Robert had worn every day, polished carefully and often referred to as his lifetime companion to Eleanor. It wasn't just a timepiece. It was the embodiment of his discipline, achievements, and unwavering love for their family. One late afternoon, while sorting through some old paperwork, Eleanor realized the watch was missing from its usual spot in the wooden box Robert had built himself. Panic gripped her as she searched the drawers, the wardrobe, even under cushions, but it was gone. When she called Kevin to ask if he had seen it, his tone was evasive, until finally, with startling bluntness, he admitted, "I sold it, Mom. It was just sitting there collecting dust. Brenda and I needed some extra money for our Italy trip." Eleanor froze, her breath caught in her chest. The idea that her son had sold his father's most treasured possession for a mere $800, less than a fraction of its true worth, struck her like a knife. She reminded Kevin how Robert had saved for years to buy that watch, how he had worn it proudly during their anniversaries and family gatherings. But Kevin, standing beside Brenda, brushed her off with a shrug. "It's just an old watch. You need to let go of the past. Dad's gone, you should move on too." Brenda smirked as she added, "Honestly, Eleanor, you're too sentimental. You can't keep clinging to things forever." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, but beneath the sorrow, a deep fire began to burn. This was not about money nor about a watch. It was about respect, about honoring Robert's memory, about a son who had betrayed his father's legacy and treated his mother as though her feelings were meaningless. That night, staring at Robert's photograph framed on her bedside table, Eleanor whispered, "I promise you, my love, I will get your watch back, no matter what it takes." From that moment on, her grief transformed into resolve. She would uncover the truth, track down the Rolex, and reclaim what rightfully belonged to Robert's memory, even if it meant standing against her own son. The next morning, Eleanor summoned all her courage and made her way to the Golden State Pawn Shop, a modest building tucked between a diner and a laundromat. Its neon sign flickered faintly in the daylight, but Eleanor's heart pounded as if she were about to enter a courtroom. This was where Robert's cherished Rolex had ended up, the very watch Kevin had so carelessly discarded. Behind the counter stood Lucas, the shop's owner, man in his late 40s with sharp eyes that seemed to weigh every customer as if they were a bargain themselves. Eleanor explained why she had come, her voice trembling but steady enough to reveal the depth of her purpose. Lucas nodded slowly and admitted the watch had already been sold to a private collector just a week earlier. Eleanor's face fell, but before despair could overwhelm her, Lucas leaned forward and lowered his voice. "There's something you should know, Mrs. Eleanor. That watch wasn't just a timepiece." From beneath the counter, Lucas pulled out a small envelope. Inside lay a single slip of yellowed paper, edges curled with age. "I discovered this when I was cleaning the watch. There was a hidden compartment in the back, crafted by a professional jeweler. Whoever had it knew exactly what they were doing. I thought you'd want to see this." Eleanor's fingers shook as she unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, Robert's neat, deliberate script. Across the faded page were words that pierced her heart. "July 15th, 1955. The day I knew I would marry you." Her eyes blurred with tears. That was her birthday, the day Robert had told her she was the only woman he would ever love. Beneath the line was a mysterious sequence. SS4457 CHO815DS. Eleanor's breath caught. It wasn't random. Robert had always loved codes, puzzles, and secret meanings. He often joked that life's greatest treasures were hidden in plain sight. Waiting for the right eyes to notice, Lucas watched her reaction carefully before adding, "The buyer." He seemed very interested in that hidden compartment, almost more than the watch itself. Whoever he is, he knew there was something valuable inside. Eleanor clutched the paper to her chest. The Rolex was gone, but Robert had left her something far more precious. A message from beyond the grave. A secret he had never revealed in life. Whatever the code meant, she knew it was the key to something important. As she left the pawn shop, Eleanor felt the stirrings of determination once more. Her son may have betrayed her, but Robert's love and foresight had left her a trail to follow. The watch was no longer just an heirloom, it was a gateway to a hidden truth. That evening, Eleanor sat alone at her small oak desk, the yellowed slip of paper spread out before her. The string of characters SS4457 CHO815DS seemed to pulse with hidden meaning under the dim glow of her desk lamp. Her years in banking had trained her to notice patterns in numbers, codes, and client portfolios. and she couldn't shake the feeling that Robert had designed this code specifically for her to unravel. She began scribbling possibilities into a notebook: account numbers, branch codes, offshore abbreviations. The letters SS caught her eye. Secure Solutions, the name of an international investment management firm she remembered from industry conferences decades earlier. Could it be? Her pulse quickened. The rest of the string looked like a login ID. If Robert had left her this, then surely the password would be something only she would know. She whispered aloud. What would you choose, Robert? Her gaze drifted to the earlier line on the note. Her birthday, July 15th, 1955. That was the day Robert had promised to marry her. The day he said his life truly began. Tears welled in her eyes. Of course, that would be the key. Hands trembling, she powered up her laptop and navigated to the Secure Solutions login page. She typed in SS4457CHO815DS as the username, then entered her birthday 07151955 as the password. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen blinked, and the account dashboard loaded. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Before her was a portfolio worth nearly $2.97 million. Stocks, bonds, offshore holdings, all meticulously diversified and performing strongly. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. Robert, all these years, she whispered. For 43 years of marriage, Robert had never once mentioned this fortune. Not during their hardest times when bills piled up and she'd clipped coupons to stretch meals. Not when Kevin asked for loans and Robert reluctantly obliged with what little they thought they had. He had hidden this, not out of mistrust, but out of protection. Scrolling further, Eleanor found transaction records stretching back decades. Robert had been quietly nurturing this account since his early 30s, reinvesting dividends, hedging risks, building something lasting. He had kept it completely separate, as if safeguarding it from the chaos of family squabbles and Kevin's reckless spending. Her heart swelled with both grief and awe. This wasn't just money. It was Robert's final gift, a shield, a safety net, a declaration that even after death, he was still protecting her. But as she closed the laptop and sat in silence, a new thought crept in. If Robert had gone to such lengths to hide this fortune, what had he been preparing her for? And who else might be aware of its existence? Eleanor wiped her tears, her resolve hardening. She had uncovered a secret that would change everything. But she also knew secrets like this never stayed safe for long. Eleanor's finger hovered over the small messages tab in the Secure Solutions account, her heart pounding as if she were about to open a door to the past. When she clicked, a single file appeared, a video dated just 3 months before Robert's death. The title read simply. For Eleanor, her breath caught in her throat. With trembling hands, she pressed play. The screen flickered, and then Robert's familiar face filled it. He looked tired, his one strong shoulders slightly stooped, but his eyes carried that same warmth she had loved since the day they met. He cleared his throat, and his voice, though weaker than she remembered, still had its firm, reassuring tone. Eleanor, if you're watching this, it means I'm no longer with you. I wish I could have told you all of this in person, but I couldn't take the risk. Eleanor pressed her palm to her mouth, a sob threatening to break free. Robert continued, his gaze steady on the camera. This money, it isn't something I built from nothing. It's an inheritance I received from my father, Kevin's grandfather, decades ago. Nearly $500,000 at the time. I knew even then that Kevin's recklessness would someday put us in danger. So I invested it quietly in places no one could trace. For 40 years, I nurtured it, grew it, diversified it. I wanted it to be our family's emergency shield. The camera shook slightly as he leaned closer, his voice lowering. But Eleanor, I must be honest. The shield wasn't meant for everyone. It was meant for you. I have watched Kevin make one poor choice after another. The debts, the lies, the way he leans on you without shame. I love him as my son, but I couldn't trust him with this. If he knew, he would squander it in months. That's why I never told him. That's why I never even hinted at it. Only you can use this money wisely. Only you will protect the family's dignity. Tears streamed down Eleanor's cheeks as she listened, her chest tightening with grief and gratitude all at once. Robert's face softened, his eyes glistening with his own emotion. My dearest Eleanor, I prayed you'd never need to open this account. I prayed that life would be kinder, that Kevin would be the man we always hoped he'd become. But if you're seeing this, then I must trust you to carry on without me. This money is not a curse, nor is it a gift to spend lightly. It's protection. For you, for the life we dreamed of but couldn't always afford. He paused, drawing in a long, shaky breath. Remember, Eleanor, I've always loved you. Since the day I wrote your birthday on that slip of paper, I knew my life was bound to yours. That will never change, not even in death. The screen froze on his face, calm, resolute, full of love before fading to black. Eleanor sat in silence. the glow of the laptop casting shadows on her tear-streaked face. Her husband had hidden a fortune, not out of greed, but out of foresight, love, and fear for their son's weaknesses. For the first time since Robert's death, Eleanor felt not just grief, but also a surge of strength. Robert had left her more than money. He had left her a mission to protect what he had built, and to shield herself from the very betrayal he had feared most. The morning after watching Robert's video, Eleanor sat at her oak desk, surrounded by neatly stacked boxes of his papers. She had not intended to go through them all at once, but something gnawed at her instinct that Robert had left behind more than just the Cayman account. At the bottom of a leather-bound folder, she uncovered an envelope marked in Robert's careful handwriting, for Eleanor's eyes only. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a thick report stamped with the letterhead of Harris & Associates Investigations. The name struck her. Robert had quietly hired a private investigator. Her heart pounded harder. She began to read. The first pages outlined Kevin's spiraling descent into debt. Offshore casinos, high-stakes poker games, and reckless wagers had left him owing $180,000 to a network of lenders whose names Eleanor didn't recognize, but whose reputations were unmistakably dangerous. The report contained photographs. Kevin entering dingy clubs in the Cayman Islands, sitting beside known gamblers. His expression equal parts arrogance and desperation. Eleanor covered her mouth in horror. Robert had known their son was drowning in darkness. She turned the page, her pulse racing faster. The investigator had traced financial documents tied to a mysterious company, Sullivan Investments LLC. On the surface, it was a real estate venture, but Harris had uncovered the truth. Kevin had secretly used the shell company to buy back several of Robert's old properties after Robert had sold them years earlier. Kevin had done it not out of sentiment, but as a way to launder money and build false credibility with lenders. Eleanor's chest tightened. As she read further, the final section chilled her blood. Typed in bold were the words, "Planned guardianship, petition against Eleanor Bennett." Harris had intercepted emails between Kevin and Brenda. Their plan was ruthless and clear. To have Eleanor declared legally incompetent, citing her age, grief, and inability to manage finances, once approved by the court. Kevin would gain complete control over her estate, and assets including the hidden fortune if he ever discovered it. Brenda had even consulted a lawyer, whose notes Harris had photographed. Eleanor's hands trembled so violently she almost dropped the report. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Her own son. The boy she had raised, sacrificed for forgiven countless times plotting to strip her of everything. With his wife as his eager accomplice, tears burned her eyes. But another emotion began to rise beneath the grief, fury. Now, Robert's secrecy made perfect sense. He had liquidated his properties and secured the funds offshore, not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't trust them. He had seen this scheme coming long before Eleanor ever suspected. Eleanor closed the folder and set it gently on the desk, her resolve hardening. They thought her fragile, they thought her blind, but Robert had armed her with the truth, and she would not let Kevin and Brenda win. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor straightened her shoulders and whispered aloud, her voice steady, "Not this time." 2 days after the devastating discovery, Eleanor's doorbell rang. Standing on her porch were two sharply dressed attorneys, Ms. Chen and Mr. Lee, carrying briefcases and projecting the polished confidence of people used to forcing outcomes. Mrs. Bennett, Ms. Chen began smoothly, "We're here on behalf of your son Kevin and his wife Brenda. This is strictly a matter of efficiency. Given your age and recent emotional stress, it would be in everyone's best interest if you signed a power of attorney. Kevin would manage your financial affairs, ensuring everything is handled responsibly." Eleanor's grip tightened on the doorknob. She could feel the pressure behind their rehearsed politeness, the implication that she was incapable, fragile, easy to corner. Instead of answering, she calmly said, "You'll hear from my counsel," and closed the door in their stunned faces. The moment they left, Eleanor picked up the phone and called Mr. Harris, the private investigator. Within the hour, he arrived with a sealed leather folder Robert had entrusted to him months before his death. "This," Harris said, placing it on her kitchen table, "is Robert's final line of defense. He wanted me to hold it until the day you needed it most. He knew Kevin might try something like this." Eleanor opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were flash drives, transcripts, and signed affidavits. Robert had secretly recorded conversations in his own home conversations where Kevin and Brenda ridiculed Eleanor, mocked Robert's illness, and brazenly discussed plans to strip Eleanor of her independence. "Don't worry," Harris assured her. "Since the recordings were made in Robert's property, they're legally admissible. I've already confirmed this with counsel." Eleanor scrolled through the files on her laptop. Kevin's voice was clear, sneering. "She's old, Brenda. The judge will believe anything we say about her being incompetent. Once I have control of her accounts, it's over." Brenda's laughter followed, sharp and cruel. "And she thanked us for it." The silly woman Eleanor's stomach turned, but the fury in her chest only solidified. Together with Harris, she contacted Robert's longtime estate attorney, who had also been part of the prearranged plan. The attorney assured Eleanor that with this evidence of fraud, manipulation, and Kevin's gambling debts, any petition for guardianship would not only fail, but backfire. When Ms. Chen and Mr. Lee returned days later with more papers and thinly veiled threats, Eleanor was ready. She slid a thick envelope across the table in her living room. Inside were transcripts, notarized affidavits, and certified debt records. "Before you proceed," she said coldly, "you may want to advise your clients of the consequences of perjury and attempted financial exploitation." The lawyers exchanged a glance, their composure cracking by the end of the week. Kevin and Brenda had withdrawn their legal threats entirely. Eleanor's inheritance and independence were fully secured, not just by Robert's foresight, but by her own refusal to be intimidated. For the first time in months, Eleanor felt truly shielded. Kevin would never touch the fortune Robert had entrusted to her. And thanks to Robert's planning, the truth was now unshakable, carved into the legal record like stone. Eleanor stood at the window that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She whispered, almost to herself, "You protected me, Robert. Now, I'll protect what you left behind."